all the strengths, all the talents, all the passions God has given me since a little girl, I'm
Yeah.
able to actually use. And so now working together with Troy in our business, it allowed me to finally live up to my full potential that God has blessed me with.
So good.
So working with him, I was so excited, but right before it was really my ego that blocked the blessing and the promise that God had for us all along.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Thriving in Tandem. And you know, honey, working with your spouse is great, but it's not always great, right?
What are you trying to say?
I mean, let's face it, right? We have our just being married. We can have our ups and our downs, and then when you work together, certainly it's going to potentially magnify any potential weaknesses or conflicts that are in there. So, working with your spouse is definitely not for the faint of heart, but at the same time, it can be the best thing you ever do.
Yes, I agree with that.
Right, and so whether you are currently working with your spouse, contemplating working with your spouse, or thinking absolutely no, like I did when we first started, this episode is for you because we have Troy and Shantel Brooks, who are Spartners.
Yeah, I'm so glad
That's their word of combining spouse and partners, business partners. They're successful business owners of the TB Effect, a faith-based company that specializes in marriage enrichment, content creation, and speaking based in Atlanta, Georgia. They recently embarked on a new journey as marriage enrichment nonfiction authors. The book just came out, Spartners, Discover the Value in Your Spouse as a Business Partner and Enrich Your Marriage at the same time. So we get to talk to them, honey.
I know. I'm excited to find out about the book.
Pick their brain because no matter, a lot of people look at us as kind of marriage experts, which I cringe because we're never experts. There's always something to learn. So we get to learn how they've been doing it, how they work well together, and how they're helping others. And so really excited for this interview. You ready, honey?
I'm ready.
All right. Troy and Shantel, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have met you. I'm glad you reached out to us on Instagram. Yeah. Like all relationships form, right? On Instagram, social media. But thanks for reaching out, and we're going to have a great time. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. So what do you mean? You guys are always thriving in tandem?
We are, I would say, would you say always? I think overall we're thriving in tandem, right? And so I would say we thrive in tandem even in the down periods, even during conflict, because it's not so much, a lot of people, I know some marriages, there's a few of us that we know, they avoid conflict.
Mm-hmm. I was raised that way.
And they kind of say, oh, we don't have arguments, which is code word for they just avoid. Right? And so that's not healthy, right? And so as we know, conflict can be very healthy as long as you're able to work through it, because it's just, you just have these disagreements. And as husband and wife, we're going to have those points of disagreement. And actually that's good, right? We have different points of view. Yep. And so that's actually healthy, and having to work through that is actually healthy because it can bring you stronger together. But anyways, so long-winded answer to, I feel we're always thriving in tandem. Yes. Regardless if it's regardless if the day's good or bad, right? Yep. It's just about we have the same goals. We're moving forward, and we're going to get through it. So I know, like you have. So first off, gotta ask. So number one, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Because we know how much hard work that goes into that. Mm-hmm. And so when you thought, though, of working together, because I know, as I look at your stories, you both were not entrepreneur-minded. I think you, Troy, were. Shantel wasn't. Shantel more was like me, work a job, get a good paycheck, get some benefits, right, and move forward. But when the thought of working together came up, how did you feel about that separately? Like, how did you both feel like that? I'll start with Shantel, actually.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I was in education for 15 years. I started out as a teacher, a leader, a school building founder, district leader, did many different things, and again, was great at what I did, but it wasn't fulfilling me in the way that I know God had called for me. I was always just like, there's more, there's more. And so when we finally made the leap to leave the career and also move and leave where we lived and come to Atlanta, I really tried to figure out all the other things that I could possibly do. We just had our second child. And so I considered becoming a doula. I considered going into counseling or therapy. I considered becoming, I don't know, like a mommy blogger. I was going to do anything except for working full time with Troy. Yeah. Troy at the time had a full blown content creation business that he had started, he founded, and I'd assist him all the time, doing different angle shots, video. I'd help him here and there with some captions, but I was just his assistant. That's his thing, not mine. And so when we first started right before we first started working together, I was really caught up in my ego. I said, there's no way that this Ivy League grad student who was the breadwinner of our family, who just left, her career, was going to just leave and assist him in his dream, in his vision. And then I saw that, wow, you know what? We weren't getting to the goal that we wanted as a family. When we moved to Atlanta and I left the career, we said, we're both going to be present for our children. We're both going to have more quality time with each other. We're going to enjoy our life together. And so what we saw was I was working in my office. He was working in his office. We were taking turns with our children. Okay, you do this, I do this. And so still at the end of the day, we still were living two separate worlds and still just kind of getting together, maybe for lunch, afternoon, but it just wasn't what we wanted. And so I finally said, you know what, I have to stop working for me and I'm going to work for us, which ultimately is working for him, God. And once I made that choice after he asked me for years.
I prayed for years.
Yes. Once I jumped on board, it was so freeing. And it was such a full circle moment where I was like, wow, all the strengths, all the talents, all the passions God has given me since a little girl, I'm able to actually use. You know how many schools I've been in and organizations I worked with that never really utilized all my strengths and assets. I was always like the underutilized employee. And so now working together with Troy in our business, it allowed me to finally live up to my full potential that God has blessed me with.
So good.
So working with him, I was so excited, but right before it was really my ego that blocked the blessing and the promise that God had for us all along.
So really it's kind of just kind of observe what was going on in your life and what you were trying to get by staying in your career and in Troy working the business wasn't working, right? So you just finally had that epiphany that, hey, maybe I should be working with my spouse in this.
But what part of your ego was holding you back? Did you think like, oh, this is something I don't want to do, I'm too good for this, or I don't want to work with him?
Pretty much, there is this statistic that I just always remembered hearing growing up, just like women leave their careers to help their husband, to take care of the kids and help their husbands do their thing. And then like 20 years later, they're like, what have I done with my life? And that's fine for women who do make that choice. For me, it wasn't a choice that I was ready. It wasn't a choice that I wanted to make because looking 20 years down the line, I didn't want to think that I missed out on what my purpose was. For so long, I studied, I read, I prayed. What's my purpose in life? And the last thing I thought it was becoming truly one with my spouse. And so that part of my ego, this story that I've told myself about being this like independent woman, was what held me back. And so once I finally heard God's calling and said, this is what you need to do. And now being able to experience the true oneness of our marriage, of our unit, has totally transformed that. And so that was definitely the part of my ego that was just like, this isn't for you. You're not like, that's not.
So you kind of felt like you would be giving up some of yourself to work with Troy.
Like I was going to give
independence.
All, and I realized I actually all parts of me.
Now, it sounds like what happened early on or almost immediately is that you actually were able to fit your strengths and talents into the business. And I know a lot of husband and wife teams, that's not what happens. And I think that's where the spouse that's assisting or supporting feels like they've given up stuff because they're not really utilizing their strengths. They're really kind of like what I did to Kaylee early on, was put them in a position because they needed help, and it was cheaper than hiring somebody to do it. And so you're really not really filling in a seat that's fit for them. It's just filling in a seat, period. So how did you, was that very intentional on Shantel's part or Troy's part or both? Like, how did you were able to do that to fit for Shantel, for you to fit based on what your gifts, skills, and talents are?
So we are a strength-based team. We started out on our first date. I asked Troy to take a Strength Finders test. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, sure.
Being, again, this like leadership mindset person, it's like, I need to know what strengths you bring to this relationship. And again,
on the first date.
Okay. Did you also ask for his W-2s?
Credit score.
Like, I wanted to know everything, and I also wanted to know what he's willing to, like, what assessments he's willing to take. And so he was like, you know what, I'll take it. And so from that moment, I learned his awe factor. I learned his power of being a communicator. I learned his power of being a community builder. And so I learned his strengths before we even started officially like dating exclusively. And so that is how we've operated in our unit. So now you fast forward to working together officially full time. It was just a no-brainer. He's like, y'all, like, you're actually great at this. And it took him also seeing that, because, you know, you have untapped talents and strengths within you that if that die over time or just go dormant. And if someone's not saying, wow, you know, you're really good at that, or wow, you know, and that's what he would always say to me when it came to our content creation.
Absolutely.
And that's just where it started. Now we're doing marriage enrichment, which is totally different. But he saw that in me. It felt good. He reignited that in me. And that's actually what we talk about in our book. That's one of our major like pointers in our book, is how you need to come and connect your strengths together, because you guys make a yin yang relationship. And instead of trying to like work on what it is that you're weak in, or just having someone fill in the gaps because that's what's needed. And there's going to be seasons where that is what's needed, right? Because right now we're a team of 2. We can't do it all, and we are doing it all, but we're not going to do it all great. There's going to be some parts that we're, you know, and so you just got to do. But when you have this yin yang relationship, you both continue to strengthen your strengths, work in your strengths, so that way you have as strong as a team as you can possibly have, given the 2 of you.
I think we balance each other out really well. We don't step on each other's toes. Again, like, we're just about being efficient this year, specifically in our business and our marriage. The word for our marriage this year is simplicity. We believe that simplicity scales and complexity fails. So how can we make this thing? Marriage is already complex. Working with your spouse is already complex. Like, why do we have to make this thing any harder? Let's operate in our gifts. We are completely yin yang. We are literally on opposite ends of the spectrum, but it balances us out really well. It didn't always in the beginning, like, you know, you're going to butt heads a little bit, but as we started to really find our rhythm, find our flow, and lean into each other, it's just really taken us to a new level.
Awesome. That's great. And so so for Shantel, it took a little bit to kind of say, okay, yeah, maybe I should be working with Troy.
Well, it sounded like it took years. He was praying about it.
And Troy, it seemed like you were like, you wanted this early on. So why?
Because I'll tell you, because, you know, when we were in New York and Shantel was a school building leader, yes, she was making more money. She was a breadwinner in our family at that time, but I had the creative freedom. I had the expression to actually make passions my paycheck, right? Like, I'm one of those people who've always found a way to make money doing things I loved. And during the height of the pandemic, when Shantel was going to school, you know what I mean, to work, and I was home with our son, Sage, it was like the reverse role. It was like me and Sage saying, like, my mommy, as she grabs her briefcase to go to work, I'm taking him to soccer practice. I'm taking him to like the daddy and me classes. Like, I'm doing all the mommy. It was mommy, me and me, but one dad, right? So like,
Mr. Mom,
the dad there,
you're Mr. Mom.
Yeah, I was Mr. Mom, but she was missing out on soccer practice, missing out on all the moments. Like, I was video recording stuff and like sending it to her so she would see it, you know? And I knew that once God put us in a position to move here, right? When we first moved here, we did take an income short, but with the blessing that God gave us with the social media business and how that kind of took off for us, it washed out as far as quality of life, balance, everything that we were able to do here. So I was like, I don't ever want you to have to go back to an environment like that. I don't ever want you to have to miss the moments that matter most. And I want us both to be in a position where we have the ability to be present for our children. I want us to work on building the financial freedom component. I want us to have autonomy, right? And then I think working together for God's purpose was just a way to honor him and build our legacy. So that was the reasoning. And I was trying to beat that into her head every day. The homegirl was like Neo in the Matrix. She just was trying to hear me. She was dodging that thing, and I prayed for her, for God to work in her heart.
So Shantel, did you get resentful at all that he was going to all the games and the practices and the events?
Again, you know what? We were playing our role. We used to always joke saying like, you married me for the benefits and I married him for the fun. And I knew that he would be able to like get us income wise, like get us past the ceiling because he is so talented and gifted in everything he does that I knew like give him the time that he needs to figure it out and grow. We're always going to be okay. But I knew my role was to get the benefits, like have that stability, that security, that working a 9 to 5 can provide. So I never had resentment at all. I was actually super grateful that we were in a position where he could be present for our child, that he could come visit me on lunch breaks and be with me for lunch and hang out and then be like, all right, I'll see you later. So yeah, I was just really grateful that that he was able to do that for our family and of course for our child.
Yeah.
That's really good. So we've heard how you're able to transition to working together and working within your strengths, but what have been some of the challenges of working together? Because it's not always all rosy.
At least for us, it's not.
Same with us. I mean, again, when you're entrepreneurs, you guys know this is not for the faint-hearted anyway. I mean, just to be an entrepreneur is not an easy thing to do. Add bringing your significant other into whatever business you're running, and I think that just really amplifies things to another level. We know that 10%. I think it says you're 10% more likely to get divorced if you work with your spouse.
Yeah.
So knowing that, there's always this hesitancy, but for us, I think we started to really find our footing, and just really leaning into God. This year specifically, as influencers and content creators, we work with really big brands, and we've been blessed to have some amazing partnerships. But one of the partnerships that has literally been paying our mortgage for the last 2.5 years, we decided to split ways. So immediately at first, like I knew things were just feeling off between the partnership. There were a lot of different moving parts and variables within the company. They cut off 100 employees. They were shifting things. Agencies were taking over. I kind of like saw the blood in the water, so to speak. And I was like, babe, I just don't know. And I was like, pain in my stomach. We got 2 small kids. We just put one in a private school that God told us to put him into. We didn't even move where we moved to put this kid into the school. We moved has the best schools in Georgia, the best public schools. So the fact that we even had this kid in a private school is a whole nother conversation. So now it's like, all right, we're about to lose one of our biggest sponsorships. We have our son in this school, and I'm over here like eye twitching, knots in my stomach until God just affirmed me one day. And I went literally, I told Shantel, and I literally went from being nervous to being so excited. I literally went from, if this door is going to close, I'm so excited for the door that we're about to walk through. And that changed perspective for us. Everything, gratitude, knowing that he's in control, surrendering. And I think, the true thing is like, when people say they believe, they walk by faith, walk by sight, do you really mean that? Like, how much do you believe that God is actually in control to do what he said he's going to do? It's so easy for us to be like, you know what? Oh, I believe God's going to make a way, and then go try to do everything on our own and wonder why we are getting nowhere. But truly leaning into him and just gave me a sense of peace. And I was able to affirm her, right, with the revelation that I got. And then I just changed things for us. And just the way we thought, God made a way. So just when we thought like, oh man, we might, who knows what we're gonna have to do? We're gonna have to scale this, figure out another business, potentially sell our, who knows what we're gonna have to do. He provided a way for us.
And something that we really lean into with that yin yang relationship is that when he was having his moment of panic, and I definitely had mine too, it just wasn't at the same time. And so by the grace of God, we were able to balance each other out. So while he was having his, like he wasn't sure, he couldn't focus, I was able to stay grounded and peaceful and be faithful that like, no, it's okay. It's like, it's going to be all right. Continue working. Go ahead. Do what you need to do. Go for your walk, work out. I got this. And then of course, when I have my moments, he's like, but this is like, it's okay. And so, finances can be a hardship for any entrepreneurial couple, especially as a startup business. And for us, just, a lot was going on, and we're just grateful to have God to lean into as our support, as our crutch, because it allowed us to weather the storm and not make any hasty, impulsive decisions that could then sabotage what it is that we're called to do, or even within our relationship. And so working with your spouse, we highly encourage that you have a healthy relationship from the jump, because finances are going to, and when I say from the jump, I mean from the beginning. And so, because finances can do what they do, but your marriage should continue to evolve no matter what is going on financially, socially. Your marriage, even though it's going to have these hard times, as we were discussing before, the conflicts should still make you stronger.
Absolutely.
So we lean into conflict. We have the best successes from conflicts that we just had to say, you know what, we got to move through so we can get to the next level. So I feel like we are challenged weekly, if not daily, working together, whether it be big or small, but we do not avoid them. We confront them, remembering that we're friends first and what our common goal is.
We choose to be the bulls and run through it, and not be the cows who run from it. You know that story?
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more specific about how do you deal with the conflict? Because that's a skill, and most couples are just going to butt heads and keep just arguing. But how do the two of you kind of deal with the issues?
So one strategy that we use and that we also share with our community is to write, weather, and win the conflict. And so when possible, like obviously this is going to take some level of emotional intelligence. So when you feel triggered, taking a meta moment, or that space and time between recognizing you're triggered and your next action, right? So taking advantage of that meta moment to not respond, but to write. And you're writing down your feelings, what happened. You're kind of getting it all out on paper. So that way it's just out. For those who don't like to write, it can be an audio note. It could just be speaking to yourself. But the purpose is to take that space and express yourself verbally, or through writing, to just get it out. Then
I'll tap in. And then weather is really important for us. So weather is basically just like taking a temperature check, reading the room, looking at your partner's disposition, looking at their body language. Are they flustered? And then being able to ask them like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 8, your cup right now, like how willing, how open are you? Are you ready to even have a conversation right now? And as Shantel says, listen, I'm at a 6 right now. I'm at a 6.5. I'm like, all right, do you need a little bit more time? She's around a 7 to 8. I know that she's ready and that she's willing to have that conversation. But if Shantel looks at me and she says, I'm a 4, that's when I just walk away, because I like living. I want to be alive.
I like my life.
I like my life.
He also does the temperature check on himself.
Myself,
approaching me.
Absolutely.
So when he's ready to deliver the message, when he's ready to listen without judgment, and these are all pointers that we, help. We make sure we understand. When he's ready for that, then he'll come, and then I'll also be able to say, I'm ready to listen without judgment, and I'm also ready to share.
And we have to really emphasize that part of assessing yourself before you go to your partner, right? And then making sure, because you guys know it, I'm sure you've experienced it. I know we've experienced it. You're having a heated debate with your spouse. You're not actively listening. You are literally just waiting for them to stop talking so that you can make your point. You're like, can you just be done? so that I can say that what I have to say, right? For what? For the apology? Like, it doesn't get any. You know what
I
I
don't
mean?
know what you're talking about, Troy.
Yeah, just from that response, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can just tell the look on her face that she's not listening to me. It's just like, no, I'm ready. Like, you're not listening to me, are you? Of course, I do the same thing. So,
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if you recognized that or not.
I got 5 points.
And after that self-evaluation is when you win. And you win a discussion by focusing on the position, not the person. So using I statements.
Yep.
I feel this.
Yep.
When this happens, I feel that.
Yes.
And so now when you're stating whatever it is that occurred, the person who you're speaking to, your spouse, isn't like, you're saying I did this.
Yep.
Instead, they're hearing how you feel, and it provides a posture of being receptive versus defensive.
Absolutely.
Which can allow for the conversation to be more productive and conducive to getting to a common goal. Yep. And that's the last part. We really try, of course, like, communicating is a work in progress for us all. But we really try not to have a conversation if the goal or argument, if the goal isn't to solve it. Yeah. We want to work through it. We want to be better. We want there to be a resolution that we both feel good about. And so if we're just like complaining and venting without the purpose of working together to solve it, we'll do our best to stop ourselves.
Absolutely. And I say that whatever the problem is, like, it's not my problem, her problem, even if it's like me positioning it or her positioning it. It's like, this problem is the problem that is getting in between us. So how do we attack this problem, right? How do we get whatever it is resolved to get it out of our way?
That's good. So this last question. Working together is great. Driving the business forward, all that stuff's good. But how do you two make sure you have fun? Because without that, right? What are we doing here, right? So go ahead, Troy. This is.
No, I got to interrupt though, because he's got to have his fun clothes on first, though. But anyways,
we don't have time for him to change clothes.
Exactly.
So I'm just teeing this up for you, Troy. Go ahead. What you start?
I'm the fun guy, man. I'm serious. I make sure, because listen, as much as I love business, I'm also a big believer that every dollar is not a good dollar. Like, just the way I love my kids, but I love my wife more. As much as I love my kids, don't make me choose. All right. I will football punt them kids somewhere when it comes to my wife. I love my wife. I'm just joking. But I love my wife, right? I love my wife. I want to make sure that we prioritize this relationship. Seriously, honestly, that's how much I love my children, right? Is that I love my wife so much that I want to prioritize our relationship. This way our kids always grow up in a happy and healthy home. I have 2 boys, right? What's the best way for me to raise them to be kind, compassionate, respectful men and to treat women right? Is by them literally seeing how I treat my wife. That means we have date nights all the time. I can't stress this enough. I don't know exactly where I heard it, but the statement is, it is so much cheaper to get a babysitter than a divorce lawyer.
Well, I got another one. I got this from some firefighters.
Tell me this one.
It's cheaper to keep her.
Right? So we prioritize that. I mean, we can be working and we'll be under the gun and we got something going on and we're wrestling our brains. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just get up. Let's go for a lunch right quick. Let's go outside. Let's do something. Let's go for a long walk. Like, I make sure that we are prioritizing our marriage always. Like, one thing that we do have in our book, in our course, in our coaching is we do prioritize MOB, which stands for marriage over business. Businesses can come and go. You can decide that, working together is not the right fit for you. But one thing that I will never walk away from is my wife. I'll walk away from the business before I walk away from her. So, we prioritize the 2-2-2 rule, which is, we try to go on date nights every 2 weeks. We try to do little weekend getaways, just the 2 of us every 2 months. And because we have kids, we try to do a vacation every 2 years, just the 2 of us. And the goal for next year is to actually make that 2-2-1, where we have one vacation every year, just us, outside of the family vacations as well. Awesome. But yeah, we prioritize intentionality and making sure. And, there was times when she's like, was a little resistant to it, but she's come around as well and understands the importance of this and how it just makes everything better. One thing I say is no matter what the business does, our marriage will continue to thrive. And I laugh all the time, but I'm like, man, if we lost everything together, we'd be the happiest people living in a cardboard box. You'd be like, they really love each other in that little box over there.
A little box.
With all those kids.
I want to add to that for all the folks who are more like me, who just like to get things done, operational one, like, okay, we got goals, we got this,
we got tasks, we got goals, we got stuff to do.
Role, for me, again, it was my ego. I always thought my role was just a little bit more important, right? Because like, without me, like our business is not going to be successful, or it's not going to continue to grow. And I really had to let that go and really respect, appreciate, and accept how important Troy's role is in the play. Obviously, we have more roles than just like get work done and play.
I get work done, y'all.
Yeah, he does get work done.
Are you sure?
But it's really taken to like real work for me to be like, okay. And thank God that he allowed me to see that. Because of that, we do have an enriched marriage. And this is what we really, 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 really want to stress. Is that you must have fun, because we're not working together to like not have fun and enjoy this. Like we want fruitful marriages, fruitful marriages that are fun, that are elevated, that are exciting. Because then what is it for?
And you can't put a price on autonomy. Like we didn't get into this thing to be burning ourselves into the ground with no time for the people that matter, whether it be our family, our children, my wife. Like I didn't get into like I've been blessed to like majority of the jobs I've had, whether it's personal training, club promotion, marketing, I was a celebrity personal assistant. A lot of the things that I did gave me the ability to have autonomy, which you can't put a price on to me. So I don't care. I don't want us to be the people that are like burning the midnight oil and we have all these things, but we have no time to spend with the people that matter most. So for us, it's like every dollar is not a good dollar. You know what I mean?
All right. That's good. Well, a great way to end this. Troy and Shantel, thank you for popping on. We've got in the show notes, we got troyandshantel.com. And then, of course, your books, Spartners, Discover the Value in Your Spouse as a Business Partner and Enrich Your Marriage. That's spartnersbook.com. And then there's also, you got your spartnersconnect.com too for your community. So anywhere else that they should connect with you?
Yeah, we love to expand our community and welcome you on Instagram. You can find us at handle We Are Spartners.
Awesome. So thank you again for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your fun. And for you listening, I know this has impacted you. So please share this with another married entrepreneur that needs to hear this. And until next week, God bless. Anything?
Yep. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.